How's it going, everybody? Will Curran from Endless Events here, and today we are talking about the virtual event, the coveted, like almost golden egg when it comes to digital experiences. What does it look like? How do you do it? And today's guest is absolutely phenomenal at doing this and does it every single day. So I'm going to be really excited to introduce her in just a minute. But I am joined by the lovely Brandt Krueger from Event Technology Consulting joining me today. Brandt, how are you doing?
Hello, I'm doing well.
I love it. I love it. Well, let's get on into our topic and get rock and rolling with this week's event icons.
It's Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, so you know what that means. It's time for another episode of #Event Icons.
Presented by Endless Events.
The show where you get to ask the icons of the events industry anything.
Just go to www.event-icons.com to ask questions.
Our iconic guests will answer them live during the entire show. Before we get started, the more people we have watching, the better the conversation. So please help share #Event Icons
on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Just tell your friends to watch at www.event-icons.com.
Now, without any further delay, this is #Event Icons.
All right, as I said, we are talking about virtual events today, and especially right now, these are the hottest, coolest thing that everyone wants to talk about. And it seems like just yesterday I talked to 3 different people about how can they transition their in-person events to virtual events. So we figured we got to get an expert here today to talk about it. And you know, she is no stranger to the Event Icons crew and family. She has been on the show before, so we want to welcome back Lori Pugh Marcum. Lori, thank you so much for joining us today on Event Icons.
Thank you for having me.
We are excited to have you today because you are a pro when it comes to virtual events. But before we get into that, I want to give you a chance to share what have you been up to since the last time you were on Event Icons. What have you been getting up to?
Well, work is busy. We have the upcoming World Education Congress. And then in all my free time, I'm getting my master's degree in meeting and events from San Diego State University.
Awesome.
Busy.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, I was going to say, not totally so busy right now.
Yeah, a little bit, but it's good.
All right. Well, I think there's going to be a ton of questions because everyone's kind of in a flurry right now of understanding how do virtual events work and everything like that. So I figured starting off with a little bit of background, because I think the last time we had you on the show, we were talking about World Education Congress, which is an in-person event, but we want to talk a little bit about your virtual events that you guys are doing. So maybe lead off, tell us a little bit about what type of virtual events does MPI do and what differs them, that sort of stuff. We'll just start off with that one.
Absolutely. So over the last, I would say 3 to 4 years, we have increased the number of webinars that we have, live webinars, in addition to the summits where we do 3 hours of education. We now teach the majority of all of our certificate sessions online, and those programs are sometimes 6 hours long, and I facilitate and teach most of those. So we've come a long way. I would have to say it was a bit of a surprise that the numbers were really so good for our virtual events. And, that's for a multitude of different reasons, whether, they can't afford the time out of the office. They want bite-sized 1-hour education, something that they can listen to while they're driving. So we've definitely seen a rise of people wanting to do more virtual events.
I love it. All right. Well, there's definitely, I think, a rise in interest in it. Brandt, why don't you kick it off? I know you have a ton of questions related to this because you've done virtual events as well. So
we've done a couple. From time to time. I mean, I guess the simplest way to kind of maybe kick things off is maybe talk about the evolution of how MPI started to explore virtual events. What kind of kicked things off initially. How long have you been doing it? Just talk a little bit about kind of how it became part of your toolbox, and how that transition has gone.
Sure. So I believe about 6 or 7 years ago, Jesse States, director of the MPI Academy, started doing these, not I would say not that often, maybe, once a month. And we saw that our attendance numbers were really increasing. So we thought, there's a good 60% of our membership that don't go to our large signature events. And we want to make sure that we're providing education opportunities to all of our membership, regardless of whether they can come to an in-person event. So we really just started to add more. And then since we added what we call NPI communities, whether that's independent small business owner, women, association planners, we've created these individual communities within the umbrella of NPI because NPI is 18,000 members, and you want to feel like you're having a customized educational networking experience. So we have started, it really ramped up for 2020, 1 to 2 webinars or live summits a week, in addition to our training courses, and really trying to serve the needs of a lot of our niche audiences that we really can't serve all of them at our live events.
Do you say you're doing one of these every week?
We're actually 1 to 2 a week.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to know too, like, what was the time it takes for you guys to plan one of these? And I'm curious in its comparison to an in-person event for you. How much time does it take for you to plan? And maybe talk us through that a little bit.
Sure. So we wanted to be very proactive about our 2020 schedule. So we actually set the days in advance for the whole year of when we would have different webinars or summits for our communities and our certificate deliveries. And then we picked topics and kind of backfilled for there. What I would say is what we found is that it really does us no good to source the speakers more than 6 months out because something will come up, then they're not able to do it. And so we just kind of put the topics out there as placeholders and then backfill. But in terms of from the time that you set up the event, to finding the speaker, getting them to turn in the session worksheet details, getting it into the platform, it does take us more time. I would say it takes about 2 hours per speaker that you have. But in terms of a live event, there's so many other things that come into play with that, having to set up AV, having to find a location. So in the grand scheme of things, it's much easier to do a virtual event than an in-person event.
How has the registration shifted as this has evolved and you've started to build out and you're doing more and more and more of these? What have the registration numbers looked like? Has it been a fairly steady increase? Was there like a big giant, like everyone just got it moment or anything like that?
Yeah, I would have to say over the last 2 years, we've seen the number of participants increase. When there's what I call skin in the game, meaning they're paying for content, people that, if they register, they're going to show up, especially for our certificate courses. But for our summits and webinars that are free, we usually have about 50 to 55% of people show up. So for example, we may have 400 people registered for a summit and you may get about 225.
That's interesting. And have you found that when you are related to those numbers, is cost pretty much relatively staying the exact same, whether 100% show up or 55% show up for you guys?
In terms of what it costs to produce it?
Yeah. I'm just curious. Yeah.
Yeah. So, our summits, which are a little bit bigger, we have a platform price, a flat fee that we pay. And, but then there's sometimes like our certificate courses, I just teach it on Zoom meetings. And so there really isn't a cost. It's just my time, which I have to say, we in 2019 we added on some certificate deliveries to make up revenue that maybe we didn't get in the first quarter, and this was a perfect way to do it because we could charge attendance for the classes, and so it really helped us make up revenue in areas we were lacking.
Ooh, that's interesting. Maybe also, can you walk us through a little bit? Do you have a template as far as like what steps you take in order to do this? Because I think that everyone's worried about this, about doing virtual events, because they're like, it's just a whole nother beast. Like, I'm not going to know what I need until I get to it. So can you walk us through kind of where you start and to the end, like up until the event, what you're doing, like what sort of AV checks you're doing, what's different than an in-person event?
So I also want to be clear that there's a difference between virtual events and hybrid events.
Yeah.
Because that becomes a lot more complicated. But if it is simply a virtual event, like we're doing here, or a summit or a training or a webinar, the process, I'm going to walk you kind of through it. So once I identify a topic, I reach out to the speaker. If they're available and interested, we send them what I call handy dandy worksheet for them to fill out with all their information and the session details, bio, headshot. And then I turn that over to an amazing colleague on my team, Reagan Sadler, and she will then make sure that it gets up on our website. She schedules rehearsals with the speakers 2 weeks in advance to check their audio, their internet, make any suggestions about the background, walk them through the features. So that takes about an hour. And then we just have the live event or summit. So our webinars actually are just an hour long. And then our summits typically are about 3 hours long.
So wait a second. You're telling me that much like the in-person events, one of the secrets is rehearsal? That's crazy talk. Wait a second.
Yes, it's true. Everything from microphone level to internet capabilities. Is it fuzzy? The lighting in the room. Even as simple as telling our webinar speakers, okay, you have to turn your camera on, and then they get very distracted by seeing themselves and so they're messing with their hair and worried about other things, and they get off topic. So yeah, rehearsal is important.
I guess walk us through too. How do you guys kind of, on the technology, the AV side, obviously as an AV nerd, I'm curious about this. Mm-hmm. Do you guys, tell them what sort of microphone they need to have, that sort of thing? Like what's kind of your standard? What do you consider good? What do you consider bad when it comes to what needs to show up? Because we all know there's a huge variety in things. Obviously, assuming they have a good internet connection, because they're doing a webcam and doing some audio. Talk a little bit through the rest of your checklist.
I would like to say that our speakers have fancy microphones, but they don't. Most of them are industry, what I call experts, and different topics. They may not necessarily be a professional speaker that does this thing all the time. So we'll really just kind of rehearse with them and give any suggestions on audio, or whether they use earbuds like I am here. But outside of that, I would say 10% of less of our speakers truly have a really good microphone setup.
I'm wondering if that's what the future is going to look like more and more as virtual events. Do you think that speakers in general, I guess this is a better question. Do you find there's better engagement with higher production value? So if, for example, I'm curious from a speaker perspective, I come up with a nice microphone and sounds really good. Is engagement higher with those people, or do you find it's less?
Well, in my case, most of the time, the speakers are delivering education that counts for continuing education credits. So it's more about the content and the visual and the interactivity of the content that's happening than perhaps the microphone. I'd say that's first. But of course, we all know we will get what I call, hijacked if the audio's off. We can't think about what the speaker's actually talking about. We get distracted very easily. But for me, it's more about the content and, decent quality audio, video, and making sure their slides are appropriate.
Nice. I like that. It's very interesting, because I think Brandt and I always talk about like audio sometimes first, but you're saying almost like the flip side of it, which is pretty interesting as well.
Yeah. It depends on what your goals and objectives are for the summit or the webinar or whatever you're doing. If it's a situation like this where it's conversational, then yes, I think audio is most important. But if you're delivering content that someone is supposed to recall and remember and apply, then that's a little different.
That totally makes sense.
I find it harder to retain information if I'm having to struggle to hear it. That's why when Will and I have these discussions, that's usually where I come down hard on like audio first and then everything else secondary. But it doesn't good audio can't overcome bad content. So I'll definitely bow to you on that one. I'm curious to know that, as I'm sure it's very different for all organizations, depending on who your core audience is and how tech savvy they are. But, do you see a significant drop off between the folks that register for the event and those that actually wind up showing up? What do those numbers kind of look like? And do you have any vibe on whether or not that's fairly typical?
Yeah, I mean, we see for our free virtual deliveries about a 55% drop, because keep in mind that, people may put this on their calendar 30 days in advance and say, you know what, I'm going to listen to it at this time. And then we work in the meeting and events industry, which means something is bound to come up and happen. So it's not something that I take personally. It's just we all have busy schedules. But what has really helped us is that we record, just like you're doing here today, our virtual summits and our webinars, and then they live on our website so people can download them, as it's available. So it may be a situation where they put it on their calendar, they can't attend, but they're going to go back and access that information at a later date.
Do more people watch recording than show up live?
Well, yeah, this is actually something I tell my speakers a lot is, you may only have, let's just say, even if it's just 100 people on your virtual event, but your recording is going to live on our website for 5 years. So there's a possibility you could have thousands of people access it within a 5-year period. And so I actually encourage our speakers to use their own PowerPoint template with their contact information, their social media hashtags. And so it's a continuous pipeline of people viewing it. I spoke on a virtual event for, I think it's called the Wealthy Speaker Podcast. And that was like a year ago, and I still get people emailing me once a month and asking me questions about it. So, the shelf life is a lot different than a live event.
That's so interesting. And then the follow-up question I kind of have to the recording portion, it's incredible that's, like you said, 6 years. How do you keep people engaged? Because obviously when you're live, like when it's live, we can give shout outs to people to say like, hey, look at this. Hey, look at that. How do you do that for the recording? Or is it really people are just there for the content? They're watching and it's the TED Talk on YouTube kind of thing?
It depends on the length. So we don't have problems with our 1-hour webinars because people are asked to type in questions in the chat box. We have somebody on our team that moderates that. And so checks in the chat box, says to the speaker, hey, we have a question. We have polls to engage people. So I'm actually just working with another company called Pickles, where I can have people draw a picture of how they're feeling, like draw a picture of how your day was, and then they do it in their app, and then it pops up on the screen, and it's just more interactive. I think we have to stop saying that, let me back up. One, yes, in-person, face-to-face meetings are, I think, the most important. However, it would be amiss for us not to think about how we can make virtual events more engaging, because, it is the now. It's not even the future, it's the now, and we've got to get on board.
I like it. Because I'm always curious about the engagement portion as well. I'm sorry. I'm asking all the questions, Brandt.
No, that's fine. I'm watching all the likes and thumbs ups and ha-has that are coming in via the social. So hi to all the folks that are out there, Sammy and Frederick and Katrina, and thanks you all for joining us. And be sure to drop your questions in there so that we can feed them to Lori.
Yes, definitely keep the questions coming in, because otherwise Will's just going to continue to satisfy his curiosity and ask all the questions. When it comes to the engagement side, everyone's talking about, so like it makes sense a lot. Everyone's kind of done the webinar thing. We have the chat, the polls. I like the drawing thing. Really cool. We'll talk about tools in a little bit. But how else do you keep people engaged? You talk about the community portion. So like, are you guys doing things like, sounds like maybe a forum is involved? Like, how do you build all these other pieces to the event beyond just watch content and maybe chat with each other? How can, like, for example, someone asked me, like, how can you replace things like digital whiteboarding sessions or the common networking and things like that? Can you talk a little bit about how you guys kind of tackle that problem?
So for our certificates, our long 6-hour trainings, We have the ability to break people out into breakout groups so they can discuss topics and information and network and then report back out to the group. So, and they can pick whoever maybe the moderator is from their breakout group to report on what they've learned. And I think also it comes to asking the right questions to your audience. So for instance, let's say I'm giving 15 minutes of content, then I will say, and I want to hear from you. Tell me if you've had an experience with this. And then I'll look in the chat box, they'll type it in. I'll go back and say, hey, Susan from Detroit said she had a situation where, there was a safety and security issue. And I'll read the example out loud. So I want to make sure that I make it as conversational as possible and bring them into it. And then, if I feel like it's crickets and I'm not getting any questions, I don't hesitate to say, hey, you guys are quiet. I want to hear from you because, knowledge sharing are the people who watch or participate in our webinars and summits have tons of experience. And it's a better educational experience if we can loop all those things in and make the content as dynamic and conversational as possible.
I like it. Oh my gosh.
Questions coming in.
Yeah, Brandt, lay down some of the lay down the questions. Lay down the questions, Brandt.
All right, so we've got Sammy Allen. I apologize. I can never remember if it's Sam or Sammy, so I apologize. So correct me someday when you see me in person. Asking virtual event management, larger scale. Have you seen emceeing active moderation to help facilitate more engagement?
Yes, particularly when it comes to hybrid events. So I'm going to just explain that a bit. So let's say, for instance, you have a situation such as you have a live event and then you want to have a virtual audience as well. Having a consistent MC in the room, in the live education room, who could talk to the speaker and say, hey, I'm representing our virtual audience. I'll be taking questions from them. And then when it comes to your Q&A time, we will, I'll ask those questions from them. For instance, if it's in between breaks, we have, for instance, on our solely virtual event with nothing in person, Reagan from my team moderates. So let's say if we have 3 speakers for a summit, she introduces everyone. If there's a sponsor, she'll introduce the sponsor, and then she'll introduce the first speaker. And then when that person is done or it's Q&A, she'll moderate, and then she will introduce the next speaker as well. So it adds continuity. And let's be honest, Sammy Allen is phenomenal, and she was our MC for our European conference. And it's a great question that she brought up, because you want to add some life and some personality and some spunk to tie, especially if you have multi different sessions of content, to tie a thread all together throughout it all.
All right, more coming in here from Chris T. Do you find there's a ceiling for attention span when it comes to the length of, and something got cut off there, length of continuously streamed content?
Yes. Yes, and
short answer. Yes.
Yes. So I'll give you another example. We have a 12-hour broadcast for Global Meetings Industry Day that is on Tuesday, April 14th, and we broadcast from around the world. And we find that our viewing time tends to be 2.5 hours. So I would say that's kind of the attention span that we have. And if we have 3 speakers, it may be that the content is not as relevant for maybe one, or they prefer one speaker out of the other. So it just depends on how engaging your speakers and your content is. But I'd say about 2.5 hours. If they're not having to report out with some kind of learning finding, or if it's not a certificate course, that's the longest I would go.
And then I think Yuri is asking kind of a sarcastic question to make sure that all the virtual events, are they coronavirus free?
Well, if you don't mind, I would like to say something on that really quick.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be very PC. Don't worry. But look, I mean, the situation that we're in, at NPI, we're full steam ahead with our educational conference that will be in June. But at the same time, regardless of whether you have a situation like the coronavirus, every event you need to consider about having a virtual component as an added source of revenue. But let's say, for instance, that you're not dealing with the situation with the pandemic or health or what have you. There are other reasons why people just aren't able to attend. And so having that opportunity to have that virtual audience is always a good thing. I know there are some companies that are organizations that are canceling their meetings and events, and I can't speak to say what their financials are, especially when it comes to just a straight exhibit. But for those who are having content where it's more of a conference situation, I encourage people to look into the virtual side of it. You may not necessarily make a whole lot of revenue on it, but you're keeping your brand alive until you can get to the next event. So I think of it that way.
So you bring a really good topic that I was going to ask earlier, but then I kind of got lost track in my rabbit hole of engagement. Cost and financials. Can you talk a little bit about what do the costs look like and what sort of costs should people be looking at when it comes to these virtual events? The more specific you can obviously be, the better, but obviously I know that it depends on how many people and MPI obviously has done a great job negotiating great contracts with different software vendors, I'm sure. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about like what are the costs, what sort of costs incur with it, and what should people be looking at?
Okay. So when you're dealing with just a virtual event, that's a good point about negotiation because I can't necessarily say what all different platforms go for. So maybe you can speak to that. But I know for us, usually we look around $2,500 for a platform that, as far as I know, has I don't want to say unlimited attendees, but close to it. And, we work with Digitel and we love them. They're really easy to work with. And we've actually in the past have done our 12-hour broadcast from their New York headquarters. This next year we're at PSAV, but the point of that saying, don't always look for the cheapest cost. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get the best quality. So that's something to keep in mind. And then of course it also comes down to how many events you're doing, right? That gives you a leg to negotiate. If it's just one a year, that's going to be a little different than if you're dealing with, like me, where you're doing 2 a week. I know we're partnering with MediaSite at WEC to look at some live streaming and some content capture. So, I mean, there's some great companies out there. I'd say get 3 or 4 quotes and see what you're looking at.
I like it. I like it a lot. Man, I like so many questions. Staffing wise, how do you guys staff your virtual events? Do you think it takes less of a team, more of a team? What's kind of your thought process for the perfect virtual event team?
Way less. So I source our speakers for all the events. But then I do a handoff. So once I have a session worksheet that has all the session details, I give it to Reagan, and Reagan's a one-woman show, and she does the rehearsal. She gets it on the website. She moderates it. And I have to say, there's something about that continuous process where it is that one person that works well. So it's not near as many, as much staffing as what you would need for a live event. You don't need a logistics person. You don't need, so it's just a lot easier.
Brandt, are you just letting me ask all the questions? He's just
I was feeding him in from the outside, and then I let you have a couple.
Bring an audience
again.
Bring an audience question into this one.
All right, so let's see here. We've got Katrina Moore asking, part of attending a conference is the in-person is the networking opportunities. How do you handle the networking opportunities with a virtual event?
That's a great point. And Katrina, there's no good, there is no virtual networking for me that is going to be as good as an in-person. But that being said, there are ways for you to do kind of breakout chat room groups. You can also find different ways that, you can encourage people to say where they're from or what company, or to idea share and really make them more of what I would call, what's the right word I'm looking for? Influencers, if you will, on a topic. So it's not so much networking, it's just leveraging their skills in part of your conversation.
Well, I mean, I can say personally that there's definitely an introductory. Sometimes it's easier to meet people online first, and then that opens the door to a later in-person meeting. And so, a lot of the people that I know in the industry now, I actually met online first.
Will and Brandt.
What's that?
Like Will and Brandt.
Like Will and Brandt, exactly. So it's one of those things that, I think sometimes, because we're in the people business, it is sometimes easy to discount and go too far the other way and say that there's no value to meeting online or something along those lines, or that somehow that those relationships are less valuable than someone that you met in person. When in my humble experience, they can be just as powerful and just as significant, even though they originally occurred online.
Well, I would have to agree with you. It's different if you're trying to network with 1,000 people in a virtual event. That's very difficult. But you have less biases when you're talking online, and we don't. It may be different cues that throw us off, like the close talker that we might experience at a live event. But then, if you're online, you have a little bit more ability to share knowledge, I think so.
Well, and just not to beat the point home, but I think also people, especially on social media and things like that, tend to be quite open to someone reaching out. Whereas, if I wanted to reach out to an industry person that I, really respected and wanted to, potentially work with or something along those lines, it's very easy to do online these days, as opposed to pre-social media days and things like that. You would have to somehow be at that same conference, be in the same room, be able to go up to them and say, "Hi, my name's Brandt. You're cool," and not feel like you're an idiot. So you can. So I think that it opens the opportunities, but then you still need that live component to kind of seal the deal and really get to know people.
Absolutely.
Preach. I mean, I definitely have to agree 100%. I mean, I grew up in the internet, so I guess I'm a little different and maybe biased in some ways. But I remember chat rooms and getting to build relationships with people I felt really close with, as well. And I think that can totally exist. It's, I think it's just we are naturally biased as an industry, I think, to bringing people together in person. So yeah, Brandt, you got to go.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, Lori, you mentioned a couple of different tools. We kind of mentioned social media a little bit, so what are some of the other tools that you're using? You mentioned Pickles, you mentioned Zoom, Digital. So what are some of the other tools that you guys are using with your live summits and things?
Sure. Our virtual event would be MediaSite or Sonic Foundry. I think they had some kind of merger there, but essentially the same company. Those are really the main ones. I think for me, it would be what the speaker can do in an interesting way during their content to either, we already talked about polls, but even if it's word clouds and saying, how do you feel about such and such, or voting on different topics, giving as much interaction and as power to the audience to participate.
I like it. There's so many tools out there when it comes to it. I think that's one reason why also a lot of people get bogged down as well, is what tool should I use and this and that. And I mean, it's just the same way that when we all started doing event planning, we probably used Excel, and then we figured out, oh wow, there's something way better to use, and oh wow, I can use this tool and this, and you evolve over time. But I think honestly, you have to be willing to take risks and make mistakes in some ways. And I think that you also bring up a really good point that not everyone's going to show up the first time too. So I think one great thing about the virtual portion is that you have that recording afterwards, so you can make changes, and something doesn't work, or a platform doesn't work, you're going to learn a lot from it as well. And maybe find a way to do it on a small scale too. I'm sure you guys do that same way. Your big summits weren't the first time. You probably start with a small webinar and then kind of built up from there as well. I'm curious to kind of broaden things up as well and go back to just general tips. What has worked really well for you guys, just in general? We've talked about tools, we talked about financial, we've talked a little bit about team, but what sort of general tips have you found that you'd say if you're doing a virtual event, you got to do this?
Well, it depends on what you're rolling up, what your overall strategy is. So I've actually used it as a marketing tool for our live event. So for instance, if I had one of our keynote speakers is for WEC is David Allison. So if I wanted to have him do a webinar as a teaser, or say, hey, we're going to have 5 of our WC keynote speakers do teasers or intros leading up to it. We hope then people will want to learn more and then come to the event. Or we could give them special offers for those who participate. So it becomes a part of a much larger strategy. It also gives me the opportunity to beta test speakers and topics. So that way, if I don't want to take a risk on a speaker I've never heard before live in person, then I could say, you know what, I'm going to kind of test drive this on a webinar and then go from there. So using that as just even topics. So for instance, if you want to stay really relevant and on top of a topic like coronavirus or crisis communications, then this allows you to be a little bit more nimble with tying your brand to a cause or an awareness. It's a lot easier to turn around and market a webinar a week, 2 weeks out than you can to plan a live event.
I'm curious. I'm curious to know too. You mentioned this a little bit, and you perfectly transitioned me back to. I was like, how are we going to get back to this? For planning ahead. Have you found that last minute virtual events get less attendance, or have you found, okay, she's like, yeah, that's it. That's the answer right there. What do you think is the perfect balance? You said a year out most of the time you're doing it. Do you feel like there's a sweet spot?
Yeah. I learned my lesson the hard way on that. It seemed like a great idea to say, hey, here's all our webinars for the whole year. But, speakers have things come up, things happen. So what I find is the 3-month mark is really healthy for me. So if I can get a session worksheet with the details and get it up on the website, giving me 3 months to market that is the sweet spot for us.
I like it. 3 months. Man, that's crazy that less people, faster turnaround, and lower cost. Like, I think someone out there is like, oh.
It's
amazing. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for those planners out there who work maybe for associations and continuing education credits, it really serves as an opportunity to drive those people, 1, to your website, to 2, to be so excited about the kind of content that you're producing they want to go to a live event, and 3, we do charge a fee if they're a non-member, and if they love what they see, that could be a member conversion tool.
I like it. All right, I got one more. I think one more question I have left. So the opposite flip side, we talked about what works really well and general tips, and feel free to lay down any additional ones you have. But what general tips? What doesn't work well? What have you found that you're just like, don't do this? We made this mistake. Tell a surprise story. I think of like something you thought was going to work and you were going to be crazy successful and just didn't.
That's a really good question. I would say coaching the speakers on how to engage with a visual audience. I have some good friends of mine who are speakers that don't do virtual events because they don't know how to not feed off of audience feedback. So for instance, if they're speaking to a crowd and they build off that excitement from people nodding their heads, and so they get a little discouraged because they're not getting automatic feedback. So that's 1. 2 is we have some speakers who want to not share their cameras of them speaking and just go through the slides, and that's a snore fest. Nobody wants to do that. And then let's see here. I think the 3rd one is don't plan too far out in advance. I know I've talked about that already, but 3 months is kind of that sweet spot. If you want to hold out that say, hey, on this date, we're going to have this particular virtual event in the topic, great. But I wouldn't kill yourself trying to get speakers and exact content up because it doesn't really draw as many people to make it worth it. Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how do you make sure that you're getting those people that don't feed off? I mean, is that part of the vetting process? Is that part of that setup where you've got the person coming in early and checking all that points? I mean, how do you get a vibe for that?
Yeah, I have to say, if you're going to take a risk, this is the type of platform to do it on because you don't have as many hard costs. And my performance isn't directly tied at the end of the year by, how so-and-so did on a webinar. But I think talking to the person in advance, if someone's interested in a webinar, if I don't know, I'm picking up the phone, and I can usually tell pretty quickly on a phone call with them if they're going to be dynamic or not. So most of the time, if people are comfortable talking in person in front of people, they're willing to try something new.
Here's maybe a little bit of a tip that we can tack onto this is from, again, Sam Allen, that apparently there is a new Facebook group of remote speakers, so that they're sharing tips amongst themselves, and hopefully that will help boost that experience level.
I feel like that group might have just gotten made because of our conversation that just had. Probably not. It's probably just simultaneous as it was going on. I think there's definitely some tips too, like for speakers in a lot of ways. I mean, like, I really feel like a lot of speakers don't think about also like your background. I mean, like, I think about whether this door is open or closed a lot of the time. I think about things like what's in the background. Like, obviously, this is like my studio, so I used to have like the pops and the toys. They can't really see in this shot, but it was a very big part of what I was doing to build this like set piece, similar to the way we think about it in a stage. And I think that it allowed people to ask me back to do more webinars because it made me look more engaging and it made me look a little bit more exciting. I picked up a nice webcam that looked really, really nice. I hope it looks nice out there for everyone. And, I mean, in a lot of ways, in some ways it was
maybe
nerdy,
a nice
but
microphone.
I want a nice microphone. I wanted a cool microphone like Brandt's. I mean, like I had like the PR40 was like the ultimate goal for sure. But I mean, I definitely think that a lot of times too, like I talk to speakers and they're regularly doing online stuff. And I'm like, why do you not have a podcasting mic? Like it's $70, and it's easy to use. It plugs straight in the computer and boom, like your audio is going to be light years ahead of where you are. And it's funny, there's videos on our YouTube channel when I started before a podcast mic and then now. And I think the quality difference is totally through the roof in a different way as well.
Yeah. I mean, even from we use Zoom just to have regular meetings. And so when I moved in my house, I wanted to make sure my background works and was something that at least was a little bit appealing. So I mean, even the background comes into play for any type of virtual event.
Oh, definitely. When I've looked at apartments, honestly, when I was going to move in this apartment, originally my desk used to face, let's see if I can get my hand in there, this way. And when I moved in this one, I knew it had to go this way. And I thought to myself, do I want this apartment? Because of that one aspect. And I think that I ended up realizing that this was going to look good in shot on the side and everything like that. But like, yeah, it's just, I think it's just it's the little things that go far. I'm curious to know too, Lori, I mean, like as virtual events become more serious too, I think right now a lot of people are willing to speak for free because there's no travel involved and you can do it from your webcam, right? I can after this I can literally go grab lunch and boom, I'm done for the day, all good to go. Do you think that also it's time for speakers to step it up too, and maybe that includes as well maybe charging to show the difference between professional and non-professional? What's kind of your feeling on it?
Well, sure, they can charge as long as they don't charge me.
Of course.
I think that is a way in the future. It is a very good possibility, and especially if you're asking for custom content or it's a long time frame. Some speakers, in my particular case, they want to get in front of our audience, right? So it depends on who the audience is, and so if it's a speaker, a motivational speaker, and then they're speaking to a group of auto mechanics or something that maybe not be relevant for them to get in front of, I do think that you're going to see more, charging more for something like that. A lot of times speakers, there's a saying, you always tell people you want them to speak and they should speak for free because it's such good, what's the right word? Exposure, right. And a speaker told me one time, you could die of exposure. So, it depends on what the business model is. I mean, if you're Mel Robbins out there making millions of dollars, it's not a fit for your business model. That's one thing. But for those who it makes sense for them and they're willing to fit it in and it works for their business plan, great.
I love that. I think that we probably will link back to our speaker episodes that we've done throughout the years too, where I think a lot of times that same feedback applies exactly to a virtual event as well. So very, very good tips. All right, Brandt, I know you got a question lined up. Yeah.
What makes you think that?
I don't know. I asked all of them, so I figured you had 1,000.
I'm really curious to know kind of where we think the future of all of this is going. I mean, it's evolved. The acceptance of it has gone pretty well over the course of the last few years, but I don't feel like the technology has evolved very much in that amount of time. And we've gotten things are a little more stable. We've got better internet connections. Obviously, as we move into things like Wi-Fi 6 and 5G and all this kind of stuff, that technology is going to continue to evolve. But with that boost in bandwidth, with that boost in speed that we're going to see with these technologies, do you see this continuing to change? And if so, how?
That's a tough question because I wouldn't consider myself a techie. So I can't say for sure. I already know that the time is now for virtual events. So I'm sure in one way or the other, the engagement level will get better with different platforms, better sound. I'm curious to see how AI will affect it. So that might be an interesting concept. It could also be in terms of ways for attendees to give feedback or drive content and be more what I call unconference type virtual events where the audience controls what they want to talk about. They become the speakers. But outside of that, I can't say that I'm, up to the newest speeds of what's coming out. So I'd look to you on that one.
I feel like we got two experts in event technology. Yes.
Well, yeah. I mean, things are going to, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. Well, I don't know. Maybe you've got more of a thought to it on that because, I mean, I feel like we can see, we've talked about things like holograms and stuff like that becoming more into play, but that's going to be more of a, hey, cool event thing that's happening in live in person, and then there's a hologram, so that's not necessarily affecting what we're talking about here. I think the reducing of latency is going to be huge. Well, I think you'd probably agree on that being able to get those questions turned around in a reasonable amount of time, because that always seems to be, you kind of need to ask a question, give it like a solid minute, because it's got to get out to where it's going. People have to think about it for a second, tippity tap, their answer into the question, have it then come back to you. So, turning that around in anything less than a minute is really hard to do at this point in time. And so that's one of the things that I can see is really increasing the interactivity speed.
Yeah, I think definitely. I think there's a lot of things that are going to go into it that are going to make it. I have a prediction that I'm willing to throw out there.
All right. I'm going to spotlight you. Here we go.
Oh my gosh. All right. So imagine back in the 90s. Do you guys remember the site called Habbo Hotel? And it allowed like your little character you built to like walk around this hotel and you chatted with people, and then I think that was pretty much all you did. I don't remember there really being any other purpose to Habbo Hotel. But like I imagine that same thing be happening with virtual events. I think that AR and VR is a little bit further off, and how we're going to do it. Obviously right now you can go hop in a chat room and literally in virtual reality walk around and do those sort of things. But I'm imagining as a computer, that's still going to be like the main interface, that we need the ability to control a character to go through multiple, like a space that we understand, which is like a hotel or a conference center and things like that, and walk into different rooms to get content, to connect with people. And I imagine the way it'll be enhanced, though, is that people need to get more comfortable with the idea of being on webcam. I mean, the fact that there's speakers out there, that their sole job is to be present and be seen, don't feel comfortable putting a webcam on, makes me kind of laugh. But I think that attendees as well need to have like, your caricature, but then you walk in a room and you can all of a sudden video chat in and you see everyone's videos almost like a Zoom with lots of people coming in. But I don't know, the action of like going into a Zoom room and having like 50 people and then leaving and clicking on a different link feels very digital and not very smooth. So I imagine like there being some sort of smoother process in that, because a lot of the technologies, as Brandt said, I think are antiquated, where they feel like you're on a website or you're on a forum site that just happens to have a live video conference with it. And I think that we need to somehow bridge that gap. And I think the more we make it feel like an in-person event, the more I think that people will understand it, will utilize it more, and maybe we can get Lori's 55% to like 99%.
As you're saying that, Will, it does occur to me that if you kind of start to combine some of those technologies, that is, we're already seeing cell phones and things like that having IR cameras and being able to sense depth, being able to combine this technology so that you can be in this kind of virtual world, put on a VR headset or something like that, and then you're just sitting in the audience and you can see the person fully rendered in 3D, or at the very least, we could start to get something a little bit more realistic than what we're getting with webcams. If you're reducing that latency and you're increasing the bandwidth, I could see that becoming more of a thing where maybe not true hologram technology, but at the very least more of a 3D representation of people.
Totally. And I think it might get to the point too where also, VR, I think, is only going to get more accepted the more headsets exist. I can see in the future that, Lori, you talk a little bit about the costs are way driving down. Let's say, for example, a massive budget event that was spending, let's say, multi-million dollars on this event was like, we're going to go 100% digital this year, which might happen this year, which will be crazy. I think there's going to be some crazy things happening over this next year. But I'm imagining them going, guess what? Instead of us spending $1,000 per attendee on food and beverage and everything like that, we're going to ship you a VR headset. And we're going to give you instructions. And we're going to show you how to install the software. And you're just going to put this headset on, and you're in the virtual event. And we spent that infrastructure that we're doing on AV and venue and things like that on building this virtual space. And I think the first person that's going to do that just gives headsets out and then just builds the whole experience, they're going to win. And that's going to be the big leap forward. But no one's done that quite yet. I don't know. I also just like to theorize on crazy things.
I don't think you're crazy, Will. I'll be honest. Lori, I'd love to get your take on it. But, I mean, it's – go.
Well, I mean, with everything that's going on in the world, I mean, I still go back to the fact I do think it's important, and I do think the in-person experience is the best one. However, if you have certain barriers and you can't do it, I would say beta test. I would love to see a company come out and do that and do it with 10 people and try it out. Or, there's tons of us who would volunteer for an experience like that. I think it's just getting over calming people's fears. Let's put it that way. How do I work this? What is the user error? I mean, not everyone is in that tech world yet. So it would take the right demographic, the right audience to beta test something like that on.
Well, that's what it was the early days of virtual events, right? It was the right audience. It was the people that had to be connected. It had to be people that were willing to give that a shot and attend virtually, who has a remote audience member. Yeah.
I like it. Well, we are starting to run out of time. We do want to make sure we get our last two final questions we ask all of our audience members. So I want to jump into related to resources that you have. I know we talked a little bit about specifically virtual events and what tools you're using. But in general, what sort of tools are you using? Tips, blogs, places? Where do you go to learn about this sort of thing? What are your favorite resources when it comes to event planning that you would love to share with the audience?
Well, I'm going to do a selfish plug and say MPI.org, because we have spent a lot of time compiling some of the best webinars. You guys have been speakers for us. You're going to be speaking on a summit coming up. And so we have some really exciting things throughout the year, including our community content was very specific. So as I mentioned earlier, if you're an independent small business owner, if you're interested in women's topics, if you're interested in diversity and inclusion, we have all new relevant content that's coming out for our website. I would say everyone who has already listened to this, but I listened to you, Event Icons, of course. So I would say those are my two favorite ones, and that may sound selfish, but really that's what I go for.
Oh, why would you scare people away by telling them that we're going to be there?
Yeah.
There's lots of other good content besides us. Believe me, so it's good. It's good. No, and we really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to the opportunity as well. So, all right, the other thing that we always have to ask folks is, do you have any new cool resources?
I just did that one. I flipped it on you. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I did resources.
I just figured that was the amazing tip.
Hey, Lori might lay it on you that MPI is the number one tip. I don't know. Right. We're going to challenge you, though. Brandt, go ahead.
No,
go ahead.
Catch. I misheard.
I moved it on the script backwards. That was my bad.
See, don't move stuff around.
But yeah, one tip that you have for planners,
There you
Lori, what do you think is your one tip that you had to give people?
Let's see here. That's a good question. I would say build a relationship with whoever your platform provider is going to be, because they have a lot of experience and you need to look at them as a partner, not just a supplier. And they can walk you through some best practices. They can send you clips of other things they've done. I think it depends on also what type of content. If it's more interviews, I would say, look up the best type of interview questions and give those to your speakers in advance. That's one. But if you're building just general content, I would say just asking your audience what it is they're looking for. And then don't be afraid to try new things. I know that was like 3 tips, but those are the ones I have.
I
think we'll allow it.
Okay, good.
I actually want to give you the platform relationship is huge, because I think you bring up a good point. They know their platform, how people use it. They're using heat map tools to know how people click on things. Like, I think it's sometimes naive for us to think that we know how people are going to use their tool, but really they have hundreds of events and they know exactly how it's going to be used. So if you say, all right, what do I have to do to get people using every aspect of this tool? I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's such a good, that tip is so good. I'm so jazzed. Awesome. Well, let's start to wrap on up with the show. Lori, thank you so much for being on the show. We really appreciate you. You're such a pro when it comes to this sort of stuff. We appreciate you being here today and sharing all the knowledge bombs that you have dropped for our audience today. So thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure and a good time.
Absolutely. And Brandt, thanks for joining on in. I mean, technically you were hosting and I just asked a million of my curious questions. Thank you for joining as always. It was always so good to talk to you.
It's all good. Happy to be here.
All right. And thank you to our audience. There's so many of you. Brandt, do you have some more names that you can give shout outs to as well? Obviously, we had Katrina, Sam, Chris, Uri. Yuri as well. So many different names in there. I think he's trying to pull it all up. But thank you guys for watching live. If you are not watching live right now, the best place. Tony Frederick, thank you guys for asking questions. You guys make this show happen. If you want to watch live and you're listening to this on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever it may be where you're listening, head on over to event-icons.com right now. Just sign up and get your information. You're going to get it right delivered to your email inbox, and also get all the links to where to watch live and all that jazz. Also, let us know. Contact us. We'd love to know if you have tips when it comes to virtual events. Give us a shout. We'd love to hear from you. The best way to do that, honestly, is on social media. We love to start conversations and bring everybody's opinions in. Just tag it #EventIcons. That's why we named ourselves that. Also, when you sign up, you'll get access to our LinkedIn groups and Facebook groups and all that sort of stuff. Also, you can always feel free to email us, eventicons@helloendless.com, and all the hosts get your emails, and we'd love to know your tips when it comes to virtual events, or just what you think. We'd love to hear from you. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you, Brandt. Thank you, Lori. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you guys all next week on another episode of Event Icons.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing episode of #EventIcons.
To catch all the bonus content, resources mentioned, and an invite to our Facebook and LinkedIn groups,
Head to www.event-icons.com. Also, let us know what you thought about this week's episode. Share your biggest takeaway. Just tag your post with #EventIcons. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you again for joining us. We'll see you next Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern, right here on #EventIcons.